Draw up a chair, get a cup of your favourite beverage. It's story time. A cuckoo lays its egg in another bird's nest and lets the host raise it as its own. In 1986, somebody did exactly that to a laboratory computer in California. And the only sign anything was wrong was that 75 cents was missing from the accounts. I'm going to tell you that story today.
Welcome to Rise and Shine, your daily business tech boost with me, Charly Leetham. If you're a small business owner looking to simplify technology and get real, actionable advice from someone with 35 years of IT experience, you're in the right place. Every episode, I'll dive into tools and systems like email, CRM, marketing and tracking, and I'll break them down into bite-sized tips you can use straight away. Your time is valuable, so let's get straight to the point. It's time to work smarter, not harder.
Rise and shine. It's your dose of business tech inspiration with me, Charly Leetham. Episode number 754. I think it's 754. It is definitely Firewall Friday. And rather than doing you got to look after your privacy and there's all these horrible things happening out there for Firewall Friday, I thought I'd tell a story and try and be a little bit funny. It's a good story. I enjoyed researching it. It's about the author of The Cuckoo's Egg, tracking a spy through the maze of computer espionage. Isn't that a title? That was published in 1989. The author is Cliff Stoll, who was born on the 4th of June, 1950. Now, this is a rollicking story. Lots of ups, lots of downs. It kind of meanders for a bit, so I'm going to try and tell it real quick. But bear with me, because there's bits I'm going to say, why are you telling us that? I think it all connects in the end. At the end of this story, I actually hope to have some really good takeaways for us as business owners as well. So we're talking about Cliff Stoll, born 4th of June, 1950. He attended Hutchinson Central Technical High School in Buffalo, New York. In 1973, he got his BS in astronomy from the University at Buffalo. Now, I always am a little careful when I say the terms BS. In Australia, they mean something else entirely. And in 1980, Cliff got his PhD from the University of Arizona. Now, it was roughly around that time. I don't have any real dates. I can't confirm the dates specifically. But around that time, Cliff went to work for Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And while he was at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, Cliff designed telescope optics for the Keck Observatory, and part of that job involved writing astronomy software. And there's an important reason I'm telling you that. It will connect. We also know that sometime around August 1986, Cliff's grant funding ran out. I just don't have any confirmed dates as to exactly when. What we do know is that when his grant funding ran out, the laboratory, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, didn't want to lose him. So they moved him across to the computer center as a systems administrator. So what we have at this point is that Cliff Stoll was an astronomer. He moved to a computing unit, a computer center, because he had the experience. But what he didn't have at this point was security background, and he certainly didn't have any clearance. And that becomes important. Lots of things I'm setting up here that are going to become important later on in this story. So what happened? Well, in August 1986, computer time at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory was billed to the minute. Every account had a number to bill against, and time was leased at about $300 an hour. Now, until August, accounts had never been out. They had been spot on to the dollar or to the cent, to the 00. We've got this. We've billed it. Perfect. The accounts were perfect. The way they did that was that there were two systems, one that tracked the usage and they double checked them. And yep, that says that, they match up. In August 1986, however, they disagreed by 75 cents. The discrepancy was found by Dave Cleveland, who was the computer center manager at that point. And Dave decided to ask Cliff Stoll, to reconcile the accounting. Theoretically, this was literally just a bookkeeping job, and it was on Stoll's second day on the job. At least that's part of the story that I've heard. I might be wrong, but that's what I've heard. It was his second day on the job, and Cliff thought it would be a really good way to get to know the system. I tend to agree with that. That's a great way to get to know the system. But what followed was anything but a bookkeeping job. Stoll went to check the accounting software first. That was written by student interns over a couple of summers. So, as with all good software, it was really badly documented. Cliff had to write his own programs to test it, and he found that the software was fine. And this is really important. This is what was important, that Cliff actually had a background in computer science and was writing his own software because he could do this sort of thing. What he decided there was that the fault wasn't in the programs, it was actually in the data. There was something wrong with the data. He went to investigate it further and to find out why. Well, what follows, I'm sure many of us, some of us will relate to. Cliff found a user account called Hunter. The user account name was Hunter. It had no billing address. It had 9 seconds of computer time that was charged to no one. So there's this account sitting in the system. It had used enough to use, or it had used 9 seconds worth of computing time. It had built up that 75 cents, but there was no one to charge for it. So that's where the discrepancy came from. Interesting, right? Isn't that interesting? So what do? Well, you delete the account. We get rid of it. So Cliff did that. He deleted Hunter and he thought he had found the issue. Gone. A few days later, though, you think, oh yeah, this job's gone. A few days later, though, they receive a letter from the NSA. Apparently, one of the lab's computers had tried to break into an NSA computer. If you're interested, it was the Dockmaster computer. It's in Maryland. I don't know much about it, but that's what it was. So they had to go and investigate that. What's going on? Why is a lab computer trying to break into an NSA computer? They traced it back to a user called Joe Sventek. It was his account. Joe was a computer scientist who had left a year earlier. However, his account was still active in the system. They hadn't deleted it. From what they could work out, this was the same hacker who had made the Hunter account, the first one, but they couldn't necessarily be 100% certain, but they were pretty certain it was the same hacker that had made the Hunter account, had access to Joe's account. What they also found at that time was that Sventek wasn't the only one. The person who had gone in and taken over, well, theoretically created the Hunter account and taken over Sventek's account, had also taken over several other accounts belonging to people who had left. The hacker had changed their password and used them as cover. So he was using, they were using those accounts to try and hack the NSA by the looks of it. So there was an investigation that went on. Stoll wrote a program that made his terminal beep. Trust me, back in the 80s, you could actually do that. You could make a program that made your terminal beep at you the moment the Sventek account got logged in. The account, he found after a little bit of tracking, was connecting from the outside through one of the lab's 50 modem connections. Of course, back in the 80s, there was no caller ID, so the only record was what the hacker had typed. How do you get that? How do you work out what he's typing when it's all in the computer? Well, go borrow printers and terminals from around the lab and put a printer on every one of the 50 modems that are there. Stoll goes home that night, comes in the next morning to find reams and reams of printout. Over the night, 3 hours had been used. Well, the hacker had connected for 3 hours. Stoll had every keystroke on paper. He had stuff he could actually start to investigate with. What became clear at the very outset of all of this was that the hacker had gained full control of the hacked machine, and it would appear that they'd had access for some time. How? Well, this is something that I talk about a lot. The way in is a really common issue. The hacker got in, believe it or not, back in 1986 on the Berkeley laboratory labs, the Berkeley thingy. They got in on a guest account that was open to anyone, and the password was guess. Guess what it was? It was guest. So the guest account had a password of guest. They logged in via the modem. They got access to the computer by typing guest. Great. Shouldn't have been okay. Shouldn't have been a problem, right? They should have had it locked out. No, sorry. There was a flaw in one of the lab's programs that allowed the hacker to promote themselves from guest to full control. Yeah, this is why I get really, really iffy about you've got to keep your software updated because of these sorts of issues. Once they got access, the hacker placed a piece of software into the system. Now, Stoll called this a cuckoo's egg, and that's why it became the title of his 1989 book. A cuckoo lays its eggs in another bird's nest, and the host raises it as its own. So this piece of software got put onto the Berkeley system. It basically ran as part of the Berkeley system. No one knew it was there until they started this investigation, and gave hackers a lovely access to other things. The lab really wasn't the point of the hack. It wasn't the target. The lab was simply a convenient entry point. The printouts that Stoll got showed that Berkeley was used as a way onto MILNET, the US military network, as well as other networks including Anniston Army Depot, White Sands, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and Fort Buckner in Okinawa, right? Once they got access, they would do things like search for words like nuclear and SDI, Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. The hacker would also copy password files, and they would plant their own programs to harvest more information off of the systems that they actually gained access to. What's really sad about all of this is that Stoll found someone hacking their system and trying to access defense systems. So he contacted the FBI, as you would, and say, hey, someone's hacked my system. They're trying to access nuclear stuff and the Strategic Defense Initiative, or the Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative. They're trying to get into defense and military facilities through the digital side, through the computer network. So he called the FBI, and the FBI went, how much did it cost? What did you lose? 75 cents? We're not interested. It doesn't qualify. We're really not interested. Oh, can you prove that the classified systems had been breached? No, we don't want to know. We don't want to know. We don't care. You've only got proof that low-level military systems have been targeted, and you've got no proof that they've actually been hacked, so we don't want to know about it. So Stoll did the right thing, and he tried to call other agencies, the CIA, the NSA, the Air Force, but no one was interested. There was no clear jurisdiction, that no one wanted to deal with this new weird type of crime. 1986, computers are just starting up. Digital crime, hacking, not a thing. They don't want to know about it, and they certainly don't want to stake their reputations on it. And there's certainly no large sum of money involved because it was 75 cents. And at that point, no classified systems had actually been accessed. Yes, they'd been attempted, but nothing had been accessed. Now, from what I can see in everything I've read and everything I've looked at up to now, it looks like Stoll tried repeatedly throughout his investigation to get these agencies involved, and they kept saying no, but he didn't give up. Now, remember, this is a guy, second day on the job. He's got a computer science background, but he's got no security background, no clearance. He didn't give up. So basically, he was trying to do a bookkeeping issue, and now he's got a hacking issue. He didn't give up. He went and obtained a warrant to tap the phone line so that he could start to trace the phone calls. That warrant only covered California. unfortunately. And to be able to trace phone calls at that time, even now, but at that time it was even more difficult. You had to keep the hacker on the line long enough so that you could trace it back through all of the exchanges to work out where they came from. This had limited success. Unsurprisingly, it had limited success. One trace reached Virginia and stopped because, oh, no, you're only got a warrant to cover California. We can't go any further. Another actually reached Germany. You can imagine how that went outside the country, not just outside the state, it went outside the country. But the biggest issue they had is that the connections only lasted a few minutes at a time, and it was never quite long enough to trace the calls back as far as they could. So the question becomes, how does one catch a bee? Well, we can use some honey. Martha, who I believe was Stoll's girlfriend at the time, maybe, suggested baiting the hacker rather than chasing them. So they went to work. Stoll invented a department at the laboratory that didn't exist. It was fictitious. It had fictitious military contracts. They created a fictional secretary called Barbara Sherwin to front it all. And they created files stuffed with plausible paperwork about a thing called SDI-net. The fake files mentioned an SDI mailing list and invited readers to join. No one expected anyone to actually join. However, a few months after that trace went live, a letter arrived at the lab addressed to Barbara Sherwin. It was written by one Laszlo Baloch, I think that's how you pronounce it, on letterhead from Trium International in Pittsburgh, asking to join the list and requesting documents named in the fake files. There were only 2 people on Earth that could reach that file and know that they could actually ask to join that list: Stoll and the hacker. Now we might have a smoking gun. More importantly, notwithstanding the separate contact to get on the mailing list, the hacker took the bait and they stayed online for hours going through what had been seeded, the honeypot that had been created. When the trace completed, it had ended up in Hanover, Germany. Perfect, right? Okay, so we're in California, or Stoll's in California. Now they've got this guy over, or this person over in Hanover, Germany, hacking the systems, trying to get into national security defense systems. Finding that hacker just opened a can of worms. German police couldn't do anything without a German warrant, and getting that warrant took months. Whilst getting that warrant dragged on, the FBI and the CIA became interested in what Stoll was doing. The FBI told him to shut the whole thing down. The CIA overruled them and kept it running. The agencies were split. FBI and Justice wanted it closed. The military and Department of Energy wanted it to run to a conviction. I don't blame them wanting to run it to a conviction. Notwithstanding what happened in America, in the end, it was the Bundespost, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, the West German Post Office, who ran the phone system and was its agents. They made the arrest. No one else did. The post office made the arrest. The West German Post Office made the arrest. The arrest ended up being Marcus Hess, and he was arrested in his home in Hanover nearly a year after the 75 cents was found and 10 months after Stoll traced him. The only other thing that I can pick up out of this, and I want to go back to that Baloch guy, or the Baloch contact, it turns out that Baloch was a Hungarian intelligence agent, or this is what I'm reading. I don't know if it's true. A few things here that are a little bit shady. Nothing might be not confirmable exactly. The KGB had asked Hungary to check whether Hess's material was genuine. So, yeah, it looks like Hungary was an intelligence agent working on behalf of the KGB to find out if the material that Hess had been stealing was actually genuine. Wow. In the end, Stoll ended up flying to Germany to testify. Hess and two others who I couldn't find their names of while I was investigating this episode were convicted of espionage. However, they got suspended sentences and no one went to prison. Damn. So what does this tell us? What does this actually tell us? All right, so we've got Marcus Hess, who was arrested in Hanover on espionage charges. They didn't go to jail. All of that aside. This is actually, from what I can see, the first documented case of computer espionage between nations. That's back in 1986, not long after desktop computing became the thing. The hacker was found by an astronomer doing the books, while every other agency built to catch him or built to catch them was told it was too small to matter. What does this mean for us, though, as business owners? Because the story is really cool, and I really loved researching this story and finding out about it and all of those things. But what does it mean for us as business owners? Well, there's a couple of things here that really stood out to me. First of all, get rid of your user accounts. If someone leaves your organization, turn their accounts off, delete them, disable them, make sure people can't log into them. Don't just change the password and leave their accounts active. Get rid of them. That's one of the biggest points of ingress into a system is an old user account because we're not monitoring it. They're gone. We don't have to worry about it. Or if they're gone, we don't have to worry about it. Get rid of the account. Patch your systems. Make sure you're keeping your software up to date. Not only did this hacker, Marcus Hess, manage to get into the lab's computers using a guest account, guest username, guest password, they were then able to escalate their privileges enough to go and get someone else's account. And it was an old user account. No one's actually going to think about the fact that it might be doing something. Well, not really. Like it flies under the radar a little bit more. And he managed to do that because the software had a bug in it. So when you see those software releases come out and they say update now, update now. Don't leave your systems vulnerable to hackers like this. Now, we are not, hopefully we are not a huge organization that people are going to use as a launch pad to go and hack a government agency or hack a defense industries partner or something. But they could. And if it's traced back to us as users, as the person that this has come from, or as the company that this has come from, we could have some trouble. Now, sure, we can do all the research and the investigation and say, no, it wasn't us, we got hacked, we're really sorry. Wouldn't it just be easier just to keep everything up to date and do what we need to do on a daily/weekly basis to avoid all of these hassles? Look, this is a great story. I love this story. I do love this story. In case you missed it, the book name was The Cuckoo's Egg, Tracking a Spy Through the Maze of Computer Espionage. The author was Cliff Stoll. Published in 1989. So if you want to go and look up the story, you can absolutely do that. If you want to go and read the book, you can absolutely do that. But please take away from this story, it's a cautionary tale. Not only is it possible, so it's a cautionary tale, not only is it possible, first of all, not only is it possible that we can actually track hackers and catch them if we've got the time, energy, and money to do so, but the cautionary tale on this is make sure we're keeping ourselves safe. Get rid of old user accounts, keep your systems patched, and use strong passwords and two-factor authentication. I've got to say two-factor authentication now because that's where we're at. What do you guys think? Did you like the story? Did you like the whole thing about that? I thought it was cool. Can you draw the parallels to what we as business owners need to do as a result of this story? I'd love to know what you're thinking. Leave comments wherever you're watching or listening to this video. If it was interesting, useful, humorous, whatever, give the video a like and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, please, guys, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you find out when I drop more content. That's it for today. I will see you on Monday for Mindset Monday. Bye.
Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to Rise and Shine, your daily business tech boost. I hope today's episode gave you some actionable insights that will make your business tech work smarter for you. If you found value, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other small business owners who could use a daily boost. For more tips, tools, and resources, visit www.askcharlyleetham.com. Until next time, keep rising, keep shining, and let's make tech simple together.